the Planning Commission meeting of Wednesday, September 21st, 2016. And with Commissioner Crandall, please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Stand. Follow me. Put your hand on your heart in your hand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And City Planner, will you please make the call to roll?
Certainly. Commissioner Eggleston.
Here.
Commissioner Blackwell.
Here.
Commissioner Talley.
Here.
Chair Brown.
Here.
Commissioner Crandall.
Here.
Commissioner Wu.
Here.
Commissioner Smith.
Here.
And this time the chair would like to recognize Commissioner Talley.
I must recuse myself from the proceedings this evening. I have been informed that I have a property interest within the 500-foot exclusionary line that's established for conflict of interest, and I wish all of my fellow commissioners good luck with the difficult subject matter ahead of them today. So, thank you.
Thank you. You're recused. Okay. There are no special order of business tonight or this afternoon. We do have the minutes from the Planning Commission meeting of 7 September 2016. Is there any additions, or is there a move to approve?
Since I see no additions, I will move that we adopt the minutes of the regular meeting of the City of San Clemente Planning Commission, September 7, 2016 at 7 p.m.
Second. Okay, I have a motion by Crandall, a second by Smith. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, opposed? Passes 6-0. Oral written communication, members of the audience may address the commission on matters of public interest which pertain to the city and are not otherwise on our agenda this afternoon. If you wish to speak, please step forward to the microphone, state your name and city of residence, and make your presentation. Please limit your presentations to 3 minutes. Madam Secretary, do we have any cards for item 6? Or does anybody else in the audience wish to speak on some other issue other than our agendized item? Okay, with that, we'll move on. There are no items on our consent calendar, and we will move there to item 8, which is the public hearing. Time limitation is 10 minutes for applicants. There are none. And for all other speakers, 3 minutes. The public hearing process includes a staff presentation, up by the applicant, not to exceed 10 minutes, and public testimony. To facilitate the meeting for all attendees, the public is asked to limit their individual presentation to 3 minutes. Following closure of the public hearing, the Planning Commission will respond to questions raised during the hearing, discuss the issues, and act upon the matter by motion. At that time, I will now like to open the staff brief. And please let Amber do their entire staff brief, and we'll hold our questions to the end.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Planning Commissioners. Amber Gregg, Project Planner on this item. So this afternoon, we're discussing draft SB2 requirements or emergency shelter zonings, along with the development standards that would potentially go with that zone. So thank you, Chair Brown, for requesting that we hold all questions to the end. I think that would just be beneficial. I may cover something in the presentation that you might have a question on, and for the benefit of the audience, it might be a better overall picture to let me get all the way through, so I really appreciate that. So an overview on what we're going to be going over, what I'm going to be going over in the presentation includes what exactly is SB2, what are the city's efforts to date in meeting housing needs, what city efforts have been made to meet SB2 so far, location criteria for establishing an emergency shelter zone, study areas that were looked at, analysis of sites, development standards, homeless persons estimate, as well as staff's recommendation. So the purpose of today's meeting is to discuss the zoning and development standards for the SB2 compliance and to provide a recommendation to the City Council. I want to stress that this is for a zone change only. This application is not a request to establish a shelter. It is merely for land use decisions tonight. So what exactly is SB2? Well, SB2 is a state law that requires cities and jurisdictions to designate one zone where a homeless shelter is permitted by right. And that means that they would not have to go through a review process such as a conditional use permit. It does not require cities to build, help fund, or provide an emergency shelter, just the zone. So the city is not proposing to establish a homeless shelter with this process. And why would this be required? Why did the state require this mandate? And that is to ensure that all communities provide at least one area where homeless shelters can locate, so not one community is overburdened. Everyone has to carry their fair share of their identified homeless need. What happens if we don't comply with this? Well, failure to comply with the law could result in additional legal challenges to us, an incomplete general plan, a non-certifiable housing element, and potentially a loss of state housing funds or tax credits. So what efforts have we made to date in meeting our housing need? The city has made quite a number of efforts. We have transitional housing as well as affordable housing. And some may wonder, what exactly is transitional housing? And transitional housing is supportive housing that helps fight the homeless problem in our society. Transitional housing is generally for a limited time and provides people with help after a crisis such as homeless or domestic violence. So we have 3 areas. That includes the Gilchrist House that provides housing for women and children, Henderson House provides housing for youth, and Laura's House for domestic violence victims of women and children. In affordable housing, the city has 6 affordable housing developments. 3 of them are age restricted and the other 3 are not. So we have Mendocino and Talega, the Mary Erickson, which is more in our downtown Maxburg area. Cottons Point is in the southern part of town, that's senior housing. Vintage Shores is in our northern section, and that's also senior housing. The Presidio is right across the street from us. That used to be called Casa de Seniors, also senior housing. And then our newest affordable housing development is Las Palmas, which is on Avenida Serra. These are all very important facilities to the health of our community, but unfortunately they do not satisfy SB2, which is why we have to adopt an overlay or a zone. So what have the city's efforts been to date? Well, in 2014, there was quite a bit of efforts to date at that time. But in 2014, the Planning Commission provided a recommendation to the City Council. And how they got to that recommendation was after 3 community meetings and 5 public hearing meetings. And their recommendation was forwarded to the City Council later in 2014. And the City Council adopted an overlay that included all public and civic zone properties, including all city-owned properties and other various zones. So what's happened since then? Well, unfortunately, the ordinance was legally challenged, and in July, there was a judgment that was made that mandated specific dates be met by the city in order to comply with a court order. The public hearing dates, the first date is tonight or today. This is the Planning Commission meeting. And at this meeting, the Planning Commission shall make a recommendation to the City Council, is what the order says. On October 18th, the City Council shall adopt an ordinance, and on November 1st, the second reading shall be done. So those are very important dates to keep in mind. So when we're looking at establishing a zone, the state also provides guidelines as to what you should be considering when zoning for an emergency shelter. And that criteria includes that it should be close to public transit, near public or social services, near job centers, free from environmental constraints, and there needs to be a realistic potential for development. When in 2014, when Planning Commission was reviewing this, they also had looked at a buffer from residential zones. So what exactly was the Planning Commission's recommendation several years ago? Well, it included the Cayuga Industrious Area, 16 parcels at 50 beds per facility, the Rancho San Clemente Business Park, and that's the larger area in orange on the screen here. Parcels 500 feet from residential zones and 35 beds per facility. And it also included churches, which were permitted by right up to 6 beds, and council later increased that up to 10 beds. So the site analysis, we had to find a starting point on how we were going to analyze all these. The order came down in July. There were some time constraints, but we did think that looking at Planning Commission's previous recommendation was a good place to start because of all the analysis that had gone into it. So we reviewed the previous sites. We updated all that information based on today's conditions, and we also looked at additional potential areas that might look more favorable today with the changing conditions as well. So what areas were studied? These are the main points. The Rancho San Clemente Triangle lot, that's a lot that's located on Avenida Pico and Caymaneser, sorry, I should know that street. That is an open space lot which would require a vote of the people in order to even be considered for this. The Sprouts Center, which was previously the Kmart Big Lots Center, so it's recently been renovated. The Calle de Industrias area, and that's an area behind Denny's. Vacant city water treatment land, that's a vacant parcel that's located on Pico, right between U-Haul and the water treatment facility. Rancho San Clemente Business Park, including the industrial area. We also looked at all of El Camino Real, the Los Molinos area, and we took another look at churches as well. So when taking all the criteria into consideration, as well as the desire to look at residential zones and provide a buffer from those areas as well, we had to look at what is the makeup of San Clemente. And the makeup of San Clemente is majority residential. So we first plotted all the residential homes in the area to see what areas we were left with. Then we looked at a 300-foot buffer from all these residences to see what kind of ground that gave us. And then we also looked at a 500-foot buffer from residentials. And the areas that are in pink are non-residential zones, light and dark. There is another area that unfortunately is where the Stater Brothers and Ocean View Plaza is on the north part of this map. That unfortunately isn't pink, but that is also an area. But what this map does is it starts kind of bringing forward areas that would be a distance away from residential areas, either 300 or 500 feet, just to start and give us a basis point. So then we looked at all of these. Where were they in vicinity to all of the SB2 criteria? In this matrix before you, if there's an X in that box, it means that it meets SB2 criteria, and if there is not, it means it pretty much does not meet SB2 criteria. So we lined all these up to find out what exactly in today's world is the best place for potentially looking at an emergency shelter overlay. And there are two areas that meet all of the criteria, and that includes the Calle de Industrias area behind Denny's, as well as the Rancho San Clemente Business Park portion. And I want to note that it does not include the industrial area. The previous Planning Commission recommendation did include that, but the industrial area doesn't meet all the criteria, so we are proposing to omit that. Now, on here you'll see that public transit is marked in the Rancho San Clemente Business Park. I think most of us are aware that the bus service itself is scheduled to stop next month. However, OCTA has given the city a grant to do a rideshare program with the city, and we have contacted representatives at the state with HCD to see would a rideshare program still count as public transit, and we believe that it would, and they believe that it would as well. So that is why it meets the public transit boxes checked here. So based on a detailed analysis that is provided in depth in your staff report, but basically summarized through the matrix, this is the area that staff is recommending. It still is reflective of very much so of what the Planning Commission had recommended in 2014. So on the left, you have the portion of the Rancho San Clemente Business Park, and on the right, you have the parcels behind the Calle de Industrias area. So we also had to look at if this was our overlay zone, what kind of capacity would this be providing for the city in order to be compliant with state law? And the Calle de Industrias area has 16 parcels there and at 5.4 acres. And the Rancho San Clemente Business Park area has 145 parcels and 250 acres. So a total opportunity of 161 parcels in order to establish an emergency shelter overlay, should one wish to come here. So the city also looked at churches. We did not look to churches to satisfy our emergency shelter requirements. The reason why we wanted to examine them, again, was because in the past, churches have provided shelter, whether it's seasonal shelters or service to the homeless, and we didn't want to prevent them from providing those services to those less fortunate in our community. So they are also noted in the ordinance at a 10-bed maximum, which is consistent with the previous approval. So as far as development standards, with every zone you need to have development standards established for a use. And the development standards include a requirement for a conditional use permit once the city's need has been met. So if the city's need is 70 persons, which is what we're identifying tonight, and we'll go over that more in a minute. But if we had a shelter capacity of 70 and another shelter wanted to come in, they would no longer be allowed to do so by right, and they would be required to get a conditional use permit. Each area identifies a maximum number of beds. In the Rancho San Clemente Business Park area, we are recommending 35 beds. It is a much, much larger area. In the industrious area, we're recommending a maximum of 50 beds in that area. And the reason for the higher number is because the development standards also note a 300-foot separation requirement between shelters. The law does allow you to do that, and so we're including that in our standards. And because it is a smaller geographical area, only one shelter will ever be able to locate there because another shelter would never physically be able to establish within 300 feet or outside of 300 feet of that. The standards also identify parking requirements and discusses supervision as well as a management plan. So how many homeless persons are in San Clemente? We use a number of ways in order to estimate that. Right now, we are using 70 as our estimated number. We had updated this the last time that City Council had approved the ordinance, and we also revisited it when we looked at our draft housing element earlier this year. And the way that that is established is by using a standard across-the-board number to come up with a ratio, and then we talk with local law officials as well as social service providers to see if that was a good number. And at the time of reviewing the housing element, they had stated that yes, that was still a good number of 70. So what is staff's recommendation? Staff is recommending that the Cayude Industrious sub-area of 50 persons be included, the Rancho San Clemente Business Park sub-area of 35 persons per facility. We are recommending that churches also be allowed by right to have up to 10 beds, the development standards that we've gone over, and an estimated homeless population of 70 in our city. So with that, that concludes staff's presentation, and staff is available to answer any questions.
Mr. Crandall, you have a question?
Yeah. Do you want to?
Mr. Blackwell.
Yes, hi Amber, thank you. I have a question about the ratio, so the calculation of the need. Can you elaborate a little more on the math associated with that?
Yes, and I'm actually going to turn it over to Veronica Tam. Veronica is our consultant that we are working with to update our housing element, and she is a forefront expert on that, so she's the best one to talk to.
The homeless population, unfortunately, it's constantly changing, so it's a little difficult to establish. But working with the state in updating housing elements, so the state, it has been an accepted methodology that they use by a proportional share, because that would be your regional share of your homeless population. Now, based on the most recent countywide homeless point-in-time count of the homeless by the Orange County Continuum of Care kind of system, they estimated about 4,500 or 4,600 homeless population in the entire county of Orange. If you divide that over the population of Orange County, that ends up to be 0.14%, like less than 0.2% of the countywide population. If you apply that particular proportion, which is a methodology that has been accepted by the state many times before, you get, to your citywide population, you get about 60-something homeless persons in your city, because your population currently is about 65,000. So applying to that, you get a little bit about 40-something to 60. I rounded up to 0.15, I believe, and then it gives you about 65 homeless persons. And we went to the county sheriff's department, or the staff went to the sheriff's department, and they came back and say if you kind of bumped it up a little bit to about 70, they feel more comfortable about it. So that's the methodology that we've used in your city, but we've used in other jurisdictions. The one note is the the point-in-time population count of the homeless is updated every other year. Which means that your homeless population needs to be updated every other year as well. So if you adopt a 70 today, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have a homeless population 2 years from now of 70, so.
Okay, I have some more on that. It's interesting that, using this ratio, it looks like there's additional information that was factored in. I was thinking possibly it was strictly related to our population now, which according to our website, we're at about 66,000 and some change
Right.
as of 2014.
Right.
So with that said, it seems reasonable that we would come up with 70, just to round up
Right.
to cover any potential growth.
Right.
Right, so would it be reasonable to say in other cities too, that would be pretty close estimate based on population alone?
A lot of cities use the same methodology. I can tell you that in some other counties, their continuum of care system and they do the homeless count the same way, same methodology every other year, but they do provide a specific city population, homeless population for their jurisdictions or for their clients. Orange County is one of the very few that doesn't do that. So in consultation with HCD for other Orange County jurisdictions, they have accepted the methodology. Or in situation where when the homeless population count does not provide jurisdictional level information, they have accepted the methodology of using a proportional share with the kind of in line with the whole SB2 idea that you need to be responsible for the regional population of the homeless.
Well, the next part of my question, maybe this is one for Amber, but you can stay because it might be in your wheelhouse. So if we have a number established, this is a projection, okay, and we are looking at our forecasted growth, how does that look? And this is starting to sound more like a planning question, but where are we in terms of build-out and growth in the city and anticipated growth over the next 2 years? So this is a biannual calculation we're going to look at for SB2, right? So we'd want to look at what the population is expected to look like in 2 years, and I'd like to know what it's expected to look like in 10 years. Do we anticipate significant growth?
I don't think you can actually project that, but in the past couple of years, actually more than a couple of years, the homeless population actually has been going down in terms of the unsheltered homeless because of the change in HUD's strategy dealing with homelessness. Their approach today is moving less towards funding emergency shelters, but more towards funding something called rapid rehousing. What they would like to do is if they see a person who is homeless or at risk of becoming homeless, instead of putting them in emergency shelters, they like to provide funding to actually move them into permanent housing or transitional housing. So because of that kind of approach, the unsheltered homeless population actually has been declining in a lot of communities or counties throughout the state. So in I would say the last 3 to 5 years, that's been 3 years. That's probably more the trend.
So there is potential that our need would not increase
Right.
in time. Okay, thank you.
But it all fluctuates with the economy, so I don't want to say that.
Yeah, uncertainties,
Yeah.
understand. Thank you.
Okay, and I think for the record, the point in time, correct me if I'm wrong, count done every other year is actually funded by the federal government, HEW, and it's also augmented by local searches and all that. I think the last time we did it, Officer Bull actually went with some people and went through our canyons and stuff like that. So there is a mechanism going forward that every 2 years, that point in time, it's updated, and so then you have to readjust accordingly in case there's some unusual surge. So there's the SB2 actually requires a dynamic to it, as I would understand. Commissioner Wu.
Yes, Veronica. You just mentioned, you talked about the methodology about calculating the homeless number. And you said countywide is 0.14%. And based on our population, which is about $65,000, they don't end up with 70. Can you clarify?
Well, there are two ways to apply the percentage, I guess. One way is based on your population share of the countywide population. But what I apply is take that 0.14% apply it to your citywide population. So there are two ways to apply it, but I think there's the range. That's why there's it could be a range between, off the top of my head, I don't know exactly what that range could be, but there are two ways to apply that proportion, and I guess it's just up to, you, how you would want to apply it. And I would err on the more conservative way, which is to, assume that you have the same level of homelessness in your community as in countywide.
Right. So what is your way to apply that?
Which is that way, applying the 0.14% to your population, and then consulting the sheriff's department to round it up higher.
So 0.14% times 65,000, what would be a number be? That's not a 70, that's a...
But we're not looking at the overall homeless population. Is the unsheltered population that you're only responsible for. So out of the 92, then only about half of them is unsheltered. I guess I'm missing that particular explanation. Because SB2 really is requiring you to be responsible for your shelter needs. So if half of your population homeless population is already sheltered, then you're only responsible for half of that's unsheltered, and then we round it up. So,
Okay, great.
yeah.
Thank you for clarification.
Sorry about that.
Commissioner Eggleston.
I have two questions for Amber. Number one, could you describe the rideshare program more fully? And what would be required of a homeless person to utilize that particular rideshare program? I understand they have to have an app or something of that nature. So I need to know exactly how a homeless person would be able to utilize the rideshare program. And number two, I'd like to find out why the industrial area of Rancho San Clemente Business Park was eliminated.
So to answer the first question, we consulted with our traffic engineering division, Tom Frank, and discussed, what were the ins and outs in general with the rideshare program. And the goal really is to provide an alternative to the existing bus route that matches it as closely as possible. It's my understanding in talking to him that there could be an app as a component of it, but that the app would not be the sole way in order to get a ride. There will be a phone number on the bus stop area, which is where somebody would go in order to access the system, where they could call that number and a ride will show up. We did ask if there was a button that somebody could push potentially, but he had said no, unfortunately, due to the number of missed calls of potential youth or somebody wanting to push that button, that it would just be a phone number that would be provided there, so no app would be needed. In regard to why the industrial area was taken out, a lot of that industrial area does not have as much of a buffer from residential. In addition, the the current bus line doesn't go up into the industrial park, so we didn't feel it had as much access as far as public transportation that would be provided through the rideshare. And there's also a park up there, and there really aren't that many supportive services. Most of the supportive services are actually in the business park itself, which is why we are proposing to eliminate it.
When the bus line was active, did it go up into the Rancho San Clemente Business Park, or did it skirt it?
It went through the business park, and then it skirted it on its way to Calle del Cerro is where it went down. And we have a map if we want to look at it a little bit more closely.
Yeah, I think that would be important,
Okay.
is to compare what the rideshare does versus the previous bus service.
Forgive me jumping around. Okay, so on this,
Everybody in the audience, please be respectful of other people in the audience. Hold your conversations down. You're interrupting the meeting. Continue.
so, thank you so much. On this map here, the dark navy blue line is the bus route that will remain existing in our city, and that's bus route 1 and 91. And then the lighter, more teal colored that's hashed is the route that's proposed to be modified with the, or I should say replaced with the ride share. I was trying to zoom in here a little bit.
Yeah, zooming would be helpful.
Give me 1 second, and we'll get out of here really quickly. And I apologize that this is going a little slow, but it'll get there. Okay. So this may help just a little. Oh. Okay. So this is where it actually goes through the business park and up and around.
This is the current bus program, is that
It
correct?
is, it is. This is the current bus program that goes through the business park, as well as through the rest of the city, up to La Plata, down Vista Hermosa, Camino Veracruz, and Camino de los Mares. So everything that you see in the lighter blue hash marked is what is going to be modified to the rideshare program.
Could you explain that again?
So the dashed areas are bus routes 191 and 193.
Okay.
OCTA is discontinuing that bus route service. The city applied for a grant with OCTA recognizing the need or desire to continue some kind of transit system in this area. So OCTA agreed to the grant to provide a ride-share service that would follow the same exact route.
So the rideshare program would go through Rancho San Clemente Business Park as the bus service did?
Exactly.
It's the exact route?
Exactly.
Exactly. Okay. Now, question is, I'm still not clear on how they would actually ask for a ride. If they don't have a phone, and there's a phone number on that, the phone service aren't pay phones around a lot at this point, so how would they ask for a ride?
The city is still working out how we're going to do that, but the best way that we have found to do it is to provide a phone number on there. So that is what we're proposing at that time, or at this time.
I just wonder how many homeless have phones, mobile phones. I'm sure some of them do. I just don't know how many would have phones. That would be a question I think that we really need answered. Because obviously it's important to have transportation.
It's my understanding from what we have reviewed in the past that a good number of them actually do have phones, but of course, we can never say that all of them have phones.
Right. Now, the lighter pink that's at the Rancho San Clemente Business Park up there, is that the industrial area that you're talking about?
So this portion is the more industrial area. And then this area over here, the area that's included in the proposed overlay is the business park zoned area.
Could you put the cursor on that again? I wasn't able to see.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm left-handed, and this thing's on the wrong side, so I apologize.
Okay.
Stretching my brain even more tonight. So it's this portion right here?
In light pink.
No, so the difference on this, I'm sorry, I don't have a microphone here. So the difference on this one is the darker pink areas are further than the 500-foot buffer shown. Anything that's shown in the lighter pink area is touched within a 500-foot buffer. I don't know why this one actually is lighter pink, because that's further. But this is the industrial area. And
Down there.
This area,
That would be where Steed Park is, down there? Yes?
Yes. Steed Park's over, this is La Plata here. And then you would turn right into Steed Park in this area.
Okay.
Steed Park is not shown in a color because it is not it's an open space park use zone.
Okay. Yeah, I couldn't see that at all. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Smith.
Yeah, Amber, on that exhibit that we're looking at now, you said lighter pink and darker pink. Is the darker pink what looks to be almost red to me?
Yes.
And you said that the pink sites have been ruled out because they encroach into the buffer?
No, we did not rule out all sites because they encroach into the buffer. The buffer was just one thing that we looked at when analyzing sites because of the desire to have somewhat of a buffer there. So not all of the pink sites, this area, these And when I'm speaking in these particular areas here, where it just goes along there. Those are proposed to be included in your overlay. And the reason why we did that is we didn't just look at a physical buffer as far as on a flat two-plane. We looked at the actual environment out there. And the area between the business park and the residences behind it also has a ridgeline. And it has an actual physical barrier, or I shouldn't say barrier, a physical divider between the two zones. And so we took that into consideration as well in our analysis.
Do you have any pictures of that could portray that a
Yes,
little bit?
so, I will
You
bring
look at the
up,
top-down map, and there's just a broad brush separation there, but having gone around the properties, there's quite a bit of vertical relief there.
so Chair Brown had submitted pictures that he wanted to show here, and we've included them on a PowerPoint because he too was looking at what the environment, the physical environment looked like out there. And so here are some pictures from some of the parcels, and Chair Brown, if you want to.
Yeah, I just was
Yeah,
out
though.
touring the area like I do with every project that we come before the commission, and I was kind of struck, because the Ridgeline Trail is one of my favorite hiking places, and there's a lot of vertical relief there that provides separation. When you look down at the maps that were provided, and so I was kind of struck for that, so I just kind of took some photographs of, that's a good couple hundred feet vertical relief there, looking around, and that's from the top of the Ridgeline Trail looking down, and so there's it's quite a pretty good sized vertical separation type. It's not to say that homeless people can't walk around it, walk up it, through it, or whatever, per se, but it does represent some of a challenge in the area, the area that staff has outlined as I walk through the area. Thank you.
Can I continue? Can
Yes.
we go back to that exhibit?
Yes.
Oh, the mic is on. Couldn't hear it. So are you saying to us that the pink zones on that map, if you blow that up again a little bigger, they, for one reason or another, do not meet the requirements for the siting of this SB2?
No, what I'm saying is that what this map is trying to show is what are the, highlight the non-residential areas as well as show how close they are to the residential areas. That's what the purpose of this map was, as well as to see where the bus routes or public transit routes were within these areas as well.
Okay, let me back into the question another way. If we go back to Exhibit 1 where we have the matrix diagram, if you can put that up. Okay, you have identified 10 properties in that matrix, and out of that 10, excluding the churches, you're only finding 2 of the properties to be acceptable for the program. Are there any others in the city of San Clemente?
Based on the analysis that we have done, no. These are the only 2 that meet the criteria to the best extent that we can find. We also talked with the Emergency Shelter Coalition, who provided a list of sites. We did a detailed analysis on those as well. 2 of those sites also happen to be Calle Industrias and the Rancho San Clemente Business Park, which are included in the overlay. And those are the only 2 that we found. And I should say they're not sites, they're areas. So those entire areas, both of those are included in your proposed overlay.
Okay, so let me just repeat what you said. Those are the only 2 areas that are acceptable for this program in San Clemente.
That's what we believe.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Wu.
Yes, Amber. Regarding the rideshare program, how long is the phone?
How long is the what, I'm sorry?
The agreement with the city. They pay 90%, the city pays 10%. How long does the pilot program last?
Right now, it's scheduled for 2 years. That's not to say that it can't be extended. It is a pilot program to see how successful it will be.
Since it will start next month, have we procured the service we need?
Currently, right now, we are in the process of negotiating the contracts with the vendors for that rideshare program, so that may take a little bit of time, but it's not expected to take too long.
Do we have any funding mechanism to make sure that it will continue if in 2 years OCTA decides not to continue it? Does the city have?
Have we looked at that at this time? It's not to my knowledge. I don't believe that we have looked at continued funding right now.
Okay, thank you.
Kind of tough to predict the future, I guess. Mr. Smith, your light's on. Are you still done there?
One other question. Going back to the matrix and the 70 beds that we're talking about, and you were talking about a ratio of 30 and 50, 50 being on the Kelly Industrious. Is it, at this point in time, is it necessary to split the 70? And is it necessary to have 2 areas?
Just so I understand your question, you're asking, is it necessary to have the Kaide Industrious Zone as well as the Business Park Zone?
Yeah.
We believe yes, it provides more opportunity for a realistic potential to establish a shelter.
So in other words, it's not really feasible to just do it on the Kelly Industrious site?
We would be very concerned about limiting it to 16 parcels. You're relying, we don't believe that the state or, and I'll defer to any legal questions to Christina, but we don't believe that the state would support that as providing a realistic potential to get it started. It would just be too small.
Okay, so that's why you're proposing 2.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Mr. Blackwell?
Yes. Thanks, Amber. So looking at the buffer between our zoning overlay and residential uses, my assumption is that we're creating a buffer to minimize the exposure to residential uses. Maybe it's smoke, loitering, increased traffic, profanity, things of that nature, but maybe I'm wrong. Was there some other reason why we considered a buffer between residential uses in this overlay?
Yes, for us, we thought that they were not a compatible use, which is why we had looked at a buffer, providing a buffer between those uses. Because San Clemente has such a large residential zoning area.
Thank you.
Water break. Are there any more questions of staff at this time? Would the Assistant City Attorney have any comments to make at this time?
Not at this time. I think it would be appropriate for the chair to open it up to public comment.
Okay. One other quick question I might have before we do open it up, just to, as I recall from this experience 2 years ago, because 3 of us remain from that time, but we did a lot of deliberation about the 500-foot buffer, Amber, and I think there was some discussion with ACT and a lot of the powers that be about how we arrived at that 500-foot buffer, and it was fairly well founded, and I think was substantiated. Do you have any other comment on the background on the 500-foot buffer?
All I'd say is that we looked at a variety of buffers. We looked at smaller buffers as well as larger buffers. We went too large, basically outzoned the entire city because the residential is dispersed so much. So the 500 was just used as a good guideline for us to look at our community.
It was a compromise we reached, because when we went to 700, I think there was nothing left in the city. So there's the power of GIS got pretty important, and we did want to. And I think the state is agreeable to some sort of separations in that regard. Is that correct?
If I could just interject here, I think that it's important, perhaps Amber can clarify for the record, that the ordinance does not contain a 500-foot buffer. Is that correct?
That's correct. This ordinance does not contain a buffer
Okay.
requirement. It only has the zoning locations
Okay.
identified.
Thank you.
And that was done in response to comments from HCD. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Commissioner, City Planner.
Mr. Chair, at some point in the meeting, I'd like our city attorney just to explain the processing of this and the requirement of the lawsuit, and then so that there's a court order that we have to comply with SB 2. So I think it would be valuable to have her interject and explain that, the
Okay.
situation.
Before we enter into public discussion, would you please explain some of the things that we're faced with here?
Sure, thank you, Chairman and members of the commission. Just, I think briefly, I know that Amber summarized kind of where we were in terms of what happened in the litigation, but just to be clear, the court issued what's called a writ of mandate. That's an order following a judgment in favor of the petitioners in the case, and the writ of mandate commands that the city take certain actions within a certain time frame. One action is that the city was required to repeal the prior SB2 ordinance and any amendments within a certain time frame, and the city has complied with that. The next requirement is that the city enact a new SB2 ordinance that's fully compliant with the law. And the writ actually requires that the city council introduce and hold first reading of that ordinance no later than October 18th, and it's October 18th meeting. It makes reference to the fact that the Planning Commission would be considering it at this meeting. While it's not a mandate, in order for the council to get it by October 18th, there has to be a recommendation by the Planning Commission this evening in order for the staff to be able to meet the legal noticing requirements for the October 18th meeting, and that's where the mandate to the Planning Commission comes in. And then by the council's first meeting in November 1st, I believe, that's when the ordinance has to be adopted and have a second reading. So that's the mandate from the court. As you know, the legislature through SB2 has mandated that municipalities zone appropriately so that there is property available for the location of a homeless shelter as a matter of right. And so that is what the Planning Commission is considering tonight, and that is the zoning ordinance. As Amber indicated, not whether or not a homeless shelter is going to be located in any particular area of the city, but creating that zoning opportunity so that shelters can be established as a matter of right with no discretionary approvals by the city. And so that's what's before the Planning Commission for consideration tonight as a recommendation to the council. It's a land use decision. It's based on the standards that is set forth in SB2. As well as general zoning laws.
Okay, so you have a feeling that the staff presentation tonight does meet the requirements of SB2?
You mean the ordinance as proposed?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, the ordinance as proposed. We've worked with staff to address the requirements of SB2. Staff has utilized the services of its consultant, and so we feel that we have presented to the Planning Commission for its consideration an ordinance that complies with the requirements of SB2.
Thank you. I have the writ amendment forward in one statement here for all of you in the room. The city represents that the Planning Commission shall be meeting on September 21st to conduct a public hearing and issue its recommendation regarding a proposed ordinance. So there's a lot of shalls and wills in the writ of mandate. Further on, as we go further on after the city council, in fact, on November 15th, we'll have a writ to the court, and which time the Emergency Shelter Coalition also has the right to come in and file not 15-page pages in length setting forth any objections to our ordinance. So there's some triggers all the way through on this for those people that are kind of coming to this to the first time. So this is a very heavy type undertaking that we're about to do tonight. So, Commissioner Wu, you have a question of the attorney?
Yes, a question for Christina. Hope it never happened, but if, just say if, the proposed resolution passed by the City Council still does not meet the court's requirement, what's the legal consequence to the city? Is the HCD going to write someone for the city?
Well, no. Under the terms of the writ, once the city council adopts an ordinance, then the city has obligation to file a document with the court that basically tells the court, we did everything we were supposed to do. And we enacted an ordinance that we believe is compliant with SB 2. The petitioner then has an opportunity to respond to that and say, we agree or we disagree. And the court, in entering its judgment, retained jurisdiction. That means the case technically is not over because the court wants to make sure that we do what we've been ordered to do, which is to comply with SB 2. So in the event that the petitioners believe that the ordinance that's ultimately adopted by the council is not compliant with SB 2, they have an opportunity to seek additional or further judicial review of the new ordinance to see whether or not it complies.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Eggleston.
I've got a comment and then a question for our city attorney. The reason that there's a buffer is to provide compatible land uses between a homeless shelter and other zoned areas. I think that's important to understand. And the question I have is, in the court itself, the court case, why was the city property not accepted by the court?
The court ruled that the way the ordinance was written, in the court's opinion, granted the city council discretion to determine whether or not a shelter could be established within the overlay zone. And that discretion is not allowed under SB 2. As I indicated, SB 2 says that we have to establish zones where they're allowed as a matter of right to be established. The court concluded that because of the surplus property policies of the city, that those policies would vest an impermissible amount of discretion in the city council to determine which of those public properties or publicly zoned properties would be available for the homeless shelter. And so that was the basis, generally the basis for the court's ruling in that case.
So since the city would have discretion with regard to our fire station, which is vacant at this point, that would not be permissible by the court inasmuch as the city that would have required discretion on the city's part. Is that correct?
Well, the court didn't necessarily rule out any of the properties. What the court said was that the fact that the city had a surplus property policy granted the council an impermissible amount of discretion.
Okay.
The court didn't identify and say this property would be okay and this property wouldn't. The court said that the process didn't meet the requirements of SB 2 because it interjected an impermissible level of discretion on the part of the council to approve the location of the shelter.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah, the writ of mandate is very clear about the 5 levels of review, the Byzantine process, whatever. And so that's one reason why all city properties have been removed basically from the ordinance, I believe. Thank you, Christina. We'll now open the public hearing. I expect and will demand that everybody respect everybody's viewpoints here. We have opposing views, some for and against. This is a public hearing process, and we hope that you will conduct this meeting with respect for one another. It is critical we do that. We welcome your feelings. We welcome your opinions. We welcome your facts. Hopefully what you said before, you've seen before us tonight, can see that what we're dealing with. And with that, this is in the order received, and we'll start the public process with Christine Statsberg, followed by Ruben Casey, and after that will be Thomas Vasquez.
So, I'm Christine Statsberg. I'm the resident property manager at San Clemente Self-Storage, which is inside the overlay, 170 Avenida La Plata. I am here representing the owners of the property. Okay. But I do live on site. It is a residence above the property. Okay, it's not business. It's not a business. Okay. A homeless shelter within the business park would directly and negatively affect not only our business, but also the other businesses within the park and the entire nature of the business park. The residential aspect of a homeless shelter would add undue risks and burdens on businesses within the park. For example, if a problem arises with regard to a shelter after hours, most businesses, unlike ours, within the business park do not have staff working on site 24/7 that could call the police or use a 24-hour hotline, leaving businesses vulnerable after hours. Even during the working hours, the location of a homeless shelter within the business park would subject businesses to additional costs due to the likely increase in loitering, vagrancy, and theft. Below are some of the increased costs that we would likely incur. Additional security costs, security monitoring, cameras, fencing, additional landscape trash pickup costs, additional fire danger due to the close proximity to a very high fire hazard area. When we bought the facility, we did so with confidence that our facility was in a business park, not near a multi-person or family residential homeless facility or shelter. The additional security concerns that would arise from residential homeless shelters are of particular importance to our business since we are a self-storage business and business depends on our security. I've lived and worked in a location at a storage facility that was close to homeless services and shelters, and it was a definite impact on our business because they go hand in hand. When you're homeless, you need somewhere to store your stuff, and it was Capistrano Beach. It was very difficult down there. So our facility already faces challenges due to the recent opening of Sovereign Health facility in the adjacent building. Shuttles from sober living homes already going in and out of there, many times dropping off patients. As a result, we've increased costs for additional security. We've increased the loitering, vagrancy, graffiti, all in the parking lot. We've all had to incur that cost just from Sovereign, which is a day-to-day business, not 24/7 in that location. Since the schools and the after-school clubs within the business park, allowing homeless shelters within the park seems contrary to public policy. Heritage Christian School, located next to us at 190, is listed on the California Department of Education School Directory for students kindergarten through grade 12. Talega Life Church was also in the business park and is across La Plata from us, has preschool and after-school programs and a licensed child care center. Given the location of nearby schools, preschools, and after-school programs, placing a homeless shelter near our facility seems contrary to good planning. Talega KinderCare, not in the business park, but is located directly behind us. We can see it from our parking lot, so they're close by as well. The OCTA announcement that the bus route was closing, I know she brought that up, Amber, but that rideshare program is just a temporary 2-year trial. I'm done.
You're done.
I had some good stuff here.
Mr. Reuben Casey, followed by Mr. Thomas Vasquez, then followed by Kathleen
Reuben Casey.
Brevin?
I'm a property owner in Rancho San Clemente Business Park. I'd like to present a scenario of what will probably happen if this passes. And let's assume you own a building in the business park, if you don't already. And let's assume that you've had a good tenant in there for a number of years, and he outgrows it, his lease is up, he moves on, and you're stuck with an empty building. And you put it on the market, and along comes a few good companies. One company really likes it, the price is right, and they're seriously interested. They ask the usual questions: how much office is in this building, how much electrical power? Then they say, who are your neighbors? And you say, oh, well, on the right of me, here's a guy that makes widgets. And on the left of you is a homeless shelter with 35 guys living in it. That blows your deal right there. They moved to Capistrano. They say, oh, we've been looking at a building in Capistrano also, and we're going to move there. And so your building sits empty. In the meantime, your payments go on, your bank payments, your property taxes, your insurance, and you're in trouble. And I don't know if you people realize the negative impact you're going to have on people if this passes. That's it.
Thank you, Reuben. Thomas Vasquez, did I pronounce it correctly? Thomas Vasquez?
That's me.
Okay. Followed by Catherine Breuven, and after that would be Dennis Etlin.
I don't see anybody that I know on this board, and I've lived in town since 1948. I've lived 161 Avenida Navarro for all that time. That's the residence right in the heart of where you're going to put the, right over my back wall is where you want to put this homeless shelter. I have a family. I have children. I don't think anybody on this council would want these people right next to where they live, where you live, where your families are, where your children are. I had to deal with these people already, walking down the street, talking to themselves, throwing garbage in my property, and going through the trash, which is against the law. Calling the cops are busy somewhere else, and when they do show up, people are all gone. And I understand that. They're overworked, and they don't have the staff. But this is a basis of what you're going to do is going to increase it 10 times in my area, and it's going to affect all the business we have. I don't understand. I haven't heard from anybody from staff. Nobody's come around and talked to me. I've lived there. I live there every day, and I see this humanity coming at me. That's, I'm sorry. I can't believe God wanted me to live like this in this beautiful town. It is a beautiful town, beautiful area. And a lot of residents enjoy it, but I'm having to deal with what nobody should be dealing with. I'm sorry, that's all I want to say.
Thank you for coming.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask Mr. Vasquez a question?
Certainly.
Mr. Vasquez? If you can come back to the mic, please. Thank you. I was at your home yesterday and knocked on your door, but your dog was just barking. I guess no one was home. But you also own the property next door, do you not, at 157 Avenida Navarro?
Yes.
And that, to me, looks like a single-family home also, next door to you.
It's all been a residence.
Yes. So you have two residential properties in the middle of the area behind Denny's, is that correct?
In 1948, that was, the city then said that was residential. There were no streets. It was a dirt road going into our property. My father paid out of his pocket to put the gas line from then Los Molinos, because there was no Pico, to our property. My father did a lot for this city, and now the city is not doing very much for me. It's not treating me like a citizen. I don't feel like a citizen. I feel like a non-person.
Well, we have, I'm going to have Mr. Petches here show some pictures of your house from Google Earth later on in the meeting. Thank you.
We need to continue the public testimony. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kathleen Brevin, I guess it is, followed by Dennis Etlin, followed by Doug Casey.
Good afternoon. My name is Kathleen Bruin. I appreciate your time this afternoon, as well as the audience. If you zone it, they will come. They've been here a long time. I understand that this is to perhaps alleviate some of the homelessness that we see in all areas of our beautiful city. However, there are some homeless that don't want to participate in a homeless shelter, but may choose to move closer to where the shelter facilities are. When that happens, encampments show up, and they're a mess. Right now, anything that happens in the Rancho San Clemente area, and in other neighborhoods as well, like Marblehead, those neighborhoods are responsible for the cleanup of those encampments. What I have not heard or read is how the city is going to help the neighborhoods that these homeless shelters may possibly bring. What will they do? Will they increase police services? Will code enforcement be the ones to take care of the cleanup? And will the neighborhoods be able to perhaps submit a bill for the cleanup to the city? Those are things that have not been, that I have not seen or read in any of the reports. Has that something that's been discussed? Is that a question more for city council? I don't know.
Thank you. Dennis Etlin? Thank you for coming in, too, by the way, for taking your time. Followed by Doug Casey, and then David Brandt.
Good afternoon. My name is Dennis Etlin. I'm a resident of San Juan Capistrano, and I volunteer with a number of organizations that support and serve the homeless. I only had 2 days to go through your material online, 160 pages, a lot of material, but so I'm going to have to mostly read my comments. I did go and visit the two locations. Just to start out by saying that your plan is inadequate and it deliberately hampers the feasibility of anybody that really wants to establish a homeless shelter in this city. The first thing I would recommend is that the Rancho San Clemente limit of 35 be raised to 100. And number two, I would recommend that the rideshare service, which is a joke, that be replaced with a plan for the city to provide a bus service to support any homeless shelter that is established in that park. And I would also request that there be perhaps some clarification for churches, that the churches are not at all subject to any of the requirements that the other shelter would be, because the feasibility of a church providing management, providing parking, providing lighting, and all of those other requirements is totally unreasonable. You're asking a church to have to spend somewhere between $50 to $70 per bed per night for those services to meet the letter of your requirement, and this plan gives no indication that there's going to be any discretion cut to the churches. So those are the three recommendations that I would make, and then I'd like to make a couple of other points. First, the Los Molinos area, while it is closer to the population centers and has some desirability in that regard, the parking is highly constrained. It presents numerous equipment dangers to pedestrians. So anybody walking in has got to deal with all those car shops, and there's no walkways in there. You are potentially displacing there's only 16 properties, so whatever shelter goes in there is going to take up 2 or 3 businesses. You're cutting down jobs when that you really need them right there, and you will adversely affect, with all the walk-in traffic, you'll adversely affect that one small shopping center that's right next to it. Number two, the Rancho San Clemente and Talega business parks are not accessible. Those are 2 miles up the hill.
Thank you.
Again, as I said, the 35-bed limit is totally unreasonable. Makes
Mr. Casey?
Totally unfeasible.
Appreciate your time. Mr. Doug Casey?
Yes, I'm Doug Casey. I own property in the city, and I'm on the board of the Rancho San Clemente Business Park. And first thing I would say for the board is, we are against having the homeless shelter in the park. Much of what I was going to say has already been covered, so I'll just emphasize a couple of things. One is that the business park is the wrong place from the point of view of the homeless. It isolates them. There are no open spaces. There are no facilities. And with rideshare, they'll have a hard time getting out of the park during the day, so they'll be staying there. And I think the results of that will be fairly obvious. And the other thing, I would like to reiterate one point. There are numerous small schools within the business park. And I don't know what kind of a buffer the city has planned on to have around those schools, but if you drew a 300 or 500 foot buffer around every school in the park, there'd be nothing left. So anyway, I think that's enough said. Thank you.
Thank you. David Bryant, followed by Tom Espander. Go ahead.
Press the...
She'll take care of the light as soon as you start.
Thank you. My name is David Brandt, and I live in the city of San Clemente. As a resident of Rancho San Clemente's Bella Vista neighborhood, I strongly oppose the proposal of placing this facility in our community. It is both unfair and impractical. The proposed site is near over 5,000 residents and many business owners whose personal security and property values will be negatively affected if this proposal is implemented. It is impractical as well, as most of the clients of the shelter live elsewhere in the city or not in the city at all, and would have to commute to the shelter without the services of a public transit system, as previously discussed. Rancho San Clemente's open space has been designated as a very high fire hazard zone area. There are now some homeless people living in the open space areas who make fires to cook meals, threatening our homes and businesses. Establishing an emergency homeless shelter in this area will greatly increase the number of transients in the open space area, increasing the risk of fires. I urge you to oppose the proposal of placing an emergency homeless shelter in Rancho San Clemente. It is unfair and dangerous for the thousands of residents and business owners of Rancho San Clemente and impractical for the clients it seeks to serve. Instead, I ask you to recommend the city yard option to the City Council, which will be presented by Vonnie Barnes. This site has ample secure space for an emergency homeless shelter and is served by public transportation. In addition, it is near employment centers, public services, and food and other shopping venues. It is an option that will work for San Clemente residents, businesses, and the shelter's clients. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Tom Alexander, followed by Leslie Davis.
I've been here before. I have basically 4 properties that we manage. One, I hate to even go to due to the homeless problems, and that's why I'm interested in here. Our San Clemente property is beautiful, easy to manage, no problem. So I don't want to go into the problems I have because they've been covered adequately this time and before. And I just want to make sure people understand the reality of what we're getting into. I read about Santa Ana, the problem they have there. It's not safe for people to go to work. Many people have said that these homeless are like you and I. That's not true at all. Not true a little bit. Some of them I have empathy for and would like to help. These people have drug addiction problems, alcohol addiction problems, mental health issues. It takes a long time to become homeless, a long time. You don't all of a sudden fall upon it. And most of these chronic homeless have been there many, many years. What I want to ask the city is, we can talk about the homeless shelter and the requirement, and I feel sorry for you folks having to deal with this. Nobody else has a homeless shelter, and there are a lot of reasons why, lots of reasons. But the city needs to address how the city is going to protect the citizens, the businesses, and the people that make this city happen. That's very, very important. What are we going to do? When I go to my problem property, the first thing I do is survey the problem. Holes in the fences, batteries pulled out of trucks that are stored there. These people, they may have a place to sleep at night, but they let them out every day. Where do they go? What do they do? The business park is empty on weekends. There's no one there. These people wander around, do whatever they want to do. The problem's exacerbated by releasing all the non-violent criminals from the prisons. Well, they consider petty crime non-violent. Well, the petty crime goes up. And they all know up to $950 they can steal or damage you do, like stealing a battery out of a work truck, and that's not a problem. I'm sure you're aware of it. So I need the city to please look at how you can protect the citizens. Not just take care of the homeless, which clearly have needs, but we need to look at the city and see how we can do that. The other thing I'm concerned about is This will be a regional shelter, not just local San Clemente, because the homeless are everywhere. More people will come. Does that mean we have to build more homeless space? Will our point-in-time count go up? That's just a question. I don't know. But it's a real scary scenario, and I hope that we can address that again. Security for the citizens. 2, we all know there will be more homeless people. We'll not eliminate the homeless problem. There will be more. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Leslie Davis, followed by Vonnie Barnes and Tom Barnes.
Hello. My name's Leslie Davis. I'm a longtime resident of San Clemente and proud to say I served as the housing coordinator for the city for 19 years. I'd also like to thank staff and leaders such as yourselves to have to deal with this really difficult issue. I reviewed the staff report and I have a couple concerns. One is the limitation of the overlay to the Kayak Industrias and the Rancho San Clemente Business Park. 2, the exclusion of the Los Molinos areas and the city-owned parcels. 3, the decision to limit the shelter to 35 persons in Rancho San Clemente and 50 persons in Kayak Industrias. These limitations make it difficult for a shelter to be developed for the following reasons. There are only 16 parcels in Kayak Industrias area, and they're pretty much all owner-occupied, and they're operated by businesses. I drove through it. There are no vacancies there. And any chances of those in the foreseeable future are pretty slim. So I have a lot of questions as to why 50 there and why we're even limiting it to these 2 areas. There are many vacancies in the Rancho San Clemente Business Park, yet the limit of 35 persons per shelter requires 2 shelters to meet the need of the 70 estimated local homeless. So that doesn't make any sense to me. As you can imagine, it's very expensive to run a shelter. For example, the current gross rent in Rancho San Clemente is $1.10 per square foot. A typical shelter of 50 persons needs to be approximately 100 square feet per person, or about 5,000 square feet. That means the rent alone would be $5,500 a month, or $66,000 a year. Add up the basic overhead and staffing costs to manage a shelter, it's about $175,000 a year. So that brings you to about $250,000 a year for one, maybe 35 to 50 person shelter. It'll be hard enough to raise the money to operate one, but requiring 2 in San Clemente, I just don't see how likely it'll be to meet our needs of the homeless. I recently read an editorial about the homeless, and it made a valid point. In a country with a high standard of living like ours, why do we treat those with the greatest needs so poorly? The homeless, the mentally ill. Nobody wants them in their city, but they're here. Considering all the opposition to shelters, it's not surprising that the state of California had to enact a law requiring cities to provide a zone for homeless shelters, and yet our leaders in this town and other towns do whatever they can to make it impossible to open a shelter. Therefore, my request to the Planning Commission is please consider increasing the capacity of homeless shelters equally between all the zoned areas to at least 50 persons and a maximum of 75 persons in times of emergencies, as well as including additional areas such as Los Molinos and city-owned properties in the shelter overlay zone. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Vonnie Barnes, followed by Tom Barnes. After that will be Kathy Domenichini.
And will you show me how to advance the slides? Before I start. What? Just show me how to use it again. This? I can tell you on. Okay, when you want to go to the next one, you just go to the right and you go back and hit the back. Okay, thank you, Amber. I'm Vonnie Barnes, President of Rancho San Clemente Community Association of 14 HOAs. The proposed business park shelter zone adversely affects public health, safety, and welfare. Contrary to Don Brown's analysis, there's easy access from the shelter zone to the fire hazard zone along the city's Ridge Route Trail, a 16-foot wide paved road missing from the city's Figure 2 and analysis. It's the black line we've added that goes directly from the racetrack, Cordillera, and Sombra to the high fire zone. Illegal trails from streets in the shelter zone also go directly to the fire zone that the city did not show or analyze. Homeless are known to use these routes to get to the fire zone to set up camp in secluded brush areas. There's no impact analysis of expected increase in the use of these routes from the shelter zone to the fire zone or of increased risk of fires in the open space. This satellite image shows the Ridge Route Trail from the shelter zone and illegal trails from city streets that go directly from the shelter zone to the fire zone. Offenders such as homeless motorcyclists, mountain bikers, off-road vehicles all use these routes to gain access to RC's fire zone to engage in illegal and dangerous activities. The city did not analyze the impact effects of increased risks of fires, biological and environmental damage to indigenous flora, fauna, habitat, and terrain of the open space, or of increased use of the Ridge Route Trail system. The shelter zone is an attractive nuisance because the Ridge Route Road and illegal trails have no security or police patrol. Offenders are not cited for trespassing, fires, drugs, alcohol, camps, motorcycles, vehicles, mountain bikes, damages, vandalism, litter dumping, and other. RRC residents, not offenders, are cited and fined by code enforcement to pay for the repairs and damages caused by the offenders. And RCCA will have additional costs to remove homeless camps and debris discarded in the open space. The OC Fire Authority also cites RRC residents for fire hazards caused by homeless and other offenders. The city should shoulder this responsibility, not RSC residents. Signs post hours and require people to stay on the Ridge Route Road, keep out of fire zones, no motorized vehicles, no smoking. But offenders are not cited, and it's been a long time. The city has not analyzed the impacts of the city's lack of enforcement. The city advertises this attractive nuisance on the city website, in magazines, and by selling trail maps like this one. Again, the proposed shelter zone adversely affects public health, safety, and welfare due to major impacts not analyzed by the city, and they're not in the matrix. Please do not approve this shelter zone area. Thank you.
Thank you, Vonnie. Tom Barnes.
Can you do it?
No.
Okay.
You better do it. Chairman Brown and Commissioners, 30 years ago, we moved into the planned community of Rancho San Clemente with a reasonable expectation that it was and would continue to be a combination of business park, residential, and open space areas. 8 years ago, the city attempted to change the land use by rezoning open space for a condominium development. This harebrained scheme was wisely stopped by the voters in the initiative action of Measure C. Now the city is at it again. They want to rezone part of Rancho San Clemente for a homeless shelter, now renamed an emergency shelter, on its land. The residents of Rancho San Clemente and business park owners unequivocally oppose this zoning change. It violates the spirit, if not the letter, of the law of the planned community. If you choose to zone Rancho San Clemente for a homeless emergency shelter, there is no way it can be built in this location. Its close proximity to the known trail system leading to the high fire zone area precludes this use. Either the courts, OCFA, or some other entity will forbid it. Slide 6. Overview of the area here, including the proposed emergency homeless shelter zone and the high fire zone area. The black line is the Ridge Route Road that leads to the high fire zone area. Slide 7. This is a close-up of the area in the previous slide. The yellow star is a Heritage Church. The white dot is a racetrack that connects to the Ridge Route route. Slide 8. This shows the contiguous connection of the racetrack to the Ridge Route Road to the high fire zone area. Slide 8. Excuse me, slide 9. This is an example of the illegal trails that honeycomb the area to the high fire zone. There are transportation routes to the high fire zone throughout the area. Obviously, whoever wrote this report has never walked this area. Slide 9. This is an example of the illegal trails that honeycomb the area. Excuse me, I'll repeat this. Slide 10. This shows the close proximity of the proposed shelter zone to the high fire zone. And slide 11. This is a continuation of the previous slide that shows the high fire danger zone on the right side of the Ridge Road Trail. There's all kinds of ways to get to the high fire zone. The homeless will not have any problem getting there. None of the information in this slide presentation is contained in the 158-page city staff report. The report is mostly recycled from the 2014 report that was rejected by the City Council. This report, as was its predecessor, is inadequate, misleading, and incomplete. Zoning a shelter in RSC will worsen the existing nuisance condition. The homeless and other intruders will be drawn to the area to set up more camps near and in the high fire zone area, increasing the risk to the health, safety, and welfare to residents and businesses in Rancho San Clemente. It looks like the fix is in. What the city staff proposes exacerbates the existing condition of transients living in the open space areas of RSC.
Thank you. Kathy Domenicini? Followed by Stephen Swartz.
Good afternoon. I am a San Clemente resident all my life, and many of my concerns and points actually were presented by Leslie Davis. I support expanding and reviewing the areas that are being suggested to include more areas. And I do have concerns about the Los Molinos area. It's hard for me to imagine that that 500-foot buffer that you're discussing applies there, because that area is not very large. For me, I had to visualize 300 feet as a football field, okay, about 1.5 football fields. So that area is rather dense, and again, I have a concern why that had 50 beds and the Rancho San Clemente area only had 35. It's much easier to run one larger shelter than smaller shelters. And another point I think it's important is to understand whether or not this potential shelter, if one does go into this one of these areas, is it 24-hour shelter? Is it a shelter where people check in at a certain time and check out at a certain time, like many shelters do? City of Laguna Beach has this, and they transport their clients back into town or other locations in the morning, and many places have done this. Additionally, I'd like to make a comment with regards to city staff that was discussing rapid rehousing. Rapid rehousing takes a long time. To get placed in shelter or an apartment or using a voucher, it can take anywhere from 8 months onward. So it's really important to know that just if you are homeless and you go to a social service and you get on a list, it takes a very long time. And even for those that are most vulnerable, there is a program where they rank people. Often a house or an apartment comes up, but maybe it's in Fullerton and they live down here and they don't want to go. So I would recommend that we expand the properties that are being suggested, and I'd really love to see the area further back by the animal shelter included. And I would like to look at other forms of transportation to see if indeed a shelter does open, if an agency could provide shelter, and if that would fulfill the transportation requirement on the matrix. I'm not sure how that works, because this rideshare thing to me sounds really not very stable. And let me just quick review here. I think that's basically it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Stephen Swartz, followed by Tom King and Jessica Johnson, which is the last card I have. If anybody else wishes to speak, then you should consider filling out a card. Good evening.
Good evening. Steve Swartz. I'm a local resident and local business owner, and this is a very challenging and difficult situation, and I'm glad you guys are the guys that are working on it and not me at this time. What I wanted to bring up is Commissioner Eggleston really hit it on the head at the beginning, is that this clashes directly with the loss of public transit within the city. So the rideshare program, to anyone's, I've looked into it because I happen to have a kid who's challenged and needs bus transportation to get to school up in Saddleback, and we're having to make other arrangements because according to OCTA, there just isn't any way they can depend on to get him to where their bus will take him up there. You're going to have the same issue here as far as when this hits the courts, and where they're supposed to have public transportation to get to and from the area, there won't be unless the city's going to step up and instead of a rideshare, do an actual scheduled bus route within the city, which I don't think they're going to do. The other issue that you have to consider is that currently a lot of the homeowners associations that have canyon facilities adjacent to their properties are being saddled with the cost to maintain and clean up the encampments that are currently going through there and being cleaned up on a constant basis. You might somewhere work into this in the permit process or the licensing process for operators, so some of that cost can be put on or shared by the operators if they're bringing in the population into the area that are going to create these situations. So those are only the two things I wanted to bring up. I think the public transportation has really clashed with the concept of getting them out to Rancho San Clemente, and so that's going to cause a real big problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Tom King, followed by Ms. Jessica Johnson, which was the last card.
Good afternoon. My name is Tom King, and I'm representing AC Tow at 180 Calle Iglesia. And in short, I want to support the letter that was given to you by Robert Benner of the San Clemente Self-Storage, shorten this. In my other life, I was a longtime planning commissioner, planning chair, and 4-time mayor of another city. And we had the similar issues, and one of the things we dealt with was dealing with the root of the problem. And that is, first of all, when consultants and other people tell you what your estimate of homeless people is, and all these hundreds and hundreds of reports get put out, I assigned the second highest paid staff member to go out and actually find out who the homeless people were, where they are, and where they need to go. And in doing so, the city people, the law enforcement, code enforcement, and others enforce laws and provided connections to social services to find mental people, put them in mental hospitals, sick people, put them in hospitals, truly needy homeless people on the street that need shelter, provide shelters. We provided shelters through our churches. Be careful of these estimates of the number of people. They told us in our town that we had about 15. It ended up we had 2. And now you've got more than that here. I've seen them. But by enforcing the encampments, if you have encampments in open space, you get rid of them. You move them on. So I think you deal with the root of the problem. There are people that have needs, and find them the social needs, even if it takes assigning staff people to do it. Thank you.
Okay. Jessica Johnson.
Good afternoon. I'm Jessica Johnson. I am a resident of Rancho San Clemente. I moved here about 4.5 years ago from the East Coast, from major cities like Atlanta, New York, Baltimore, that have major homeless issues. And in those areas, the shelters were around areas that had major transportation. They were not near homes. And so what I'm asking you as a resident, as a mother of a 4.5-year-old that moved here to the Spanish Village by the Sea, because of the life that you provide in San Clemente, to really provide an area where the homeless can have more access to jobs, public transportation. They don't have phones. They're not going to have an app on their iPhone. They don't have that type of thing to call for a ride share. So that's not going to be a solution. The fire hazard, the encampments that are all over Pico that we've already talked about, we need to remove those. We don't need to add more to them. Our children are picking up needles in parks all around San Clemente because of the transients that we have, the drug users. I didn't move here to have our children be, picking up drugs, and I think that's only going to increase the issue if you have it in a huge residential area like Rancho San Clemente. I suggest that you propose the hospital. I don't think that's something that I've seen considered, and I think that's a vacant property right now, or the city yard. I also like that suggestion. I just ask that you strongly consider this because we all have children and we all have family, and we don't want them in our backyards.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak make an input during this public comment period? If not, we'll close the public comment period. And let me reiterate a few things here that we have to do tonight. And we have to make a land use decision. We have to zone an area to comply with state law. And the Mid-Atlantic writ of mandate from the court. This is not easy. The court has really severely restricted our options, and so there are no really good decisions. There are really no good areas in San Clemente. There's only viable areas, and so you have to figure this out. And so it's not easy for those of us that volunteered for this job. I'm retired military and 2 tours in Vietnam, and a lot of times I got orders I didn't want to carry out, and I had to do it. Lucked out I'm still here. But once again, some of you made some very, cogent points tonight. We can't predict the future as far as transportation or the way somebody's going to call to get a ride or how long that test program goes. There's some other people have some really good ideas, but we're not in the budget business here. That's a council responsibility. We're here for land zoning and land use. That's what the state empowers us to do, to make a recommendation to the council. So what we do here has some severe boundaries on it. So we have to keep that in mind. But also, we did receive a comprehensive letter this afternoon and this morning, I guess, from the Shelter Coalition, dated today. It's on our dais. I had a very brief time to read it. We did not get it, I don't know, electronically was it provided to us? Last time I checked in with my city email account was about 11 o'clock this morning before I came up here at 2. But I found it here in the dais, having a series of concerns that we have not, security plan, all these other issues that are concerned. But I'd like to note for the record that we did receive it here at the dais when we got here. And I've had, I don't know, I didn't have any time to review it. I don't know if the other 6 of us had. I'll also note that in the original lawsuit that was brought forward by the coalition, summary petition, paragraph 1, the Planning Commission, quote, got it right when after many months of intense public meetings it proposed an ordinance to zone so many properties, et cetera, which is basically what we have again before us tonight. So the Emergency Shelter Coalition now has some additional concerns, but as I read the writ of mandate, the judge has not mandated any of that against us or for some of the methodology we went to come up with the issues that we have before us. So I'd just like to make sure that the record does state that we received it. Some other stuff that we've had that we had before. So this is going to be a tough discussion. It's as tough as we want to make it. There are no easy decisions. I want to ask each commissioner, you got a problem or an issue, I'm going to ask you for a solution. There are no easy, it's easy to say, I have a problem with this. That's just not going to get it done. I ask each commissioner to, leave your egos at home, check your opinions and feelings, and leave them in your car in the parking lot. When we come up to this dais, we have to transition and compartmentalize. We have to leave that behind. We have to bring the skill set that we went to City Council and applied for this job. We have to bring your knowledge and what you knew about land lease, and as much as you know about land use laws, and with the assistance of a city planner, professional staff, a housing element expert, and also our city attorney. But we have to make this with all this decision with unusual legal oversight, which doesn't give us a lot of wiggle room here. And the timing is absolutely strict in the guidelines of what we have to do. We have to make a decision tonight. It has to be turned around by councils for a certain date. That has to be given to the judge who has approval. There's other rights of overseeing that I've pointed out before. So what we have to do here is bring our skill sets and start talking about a land solution. It's tough. This is basically what we struggled with 2 years ago. There's 3 of us remain from that time. We struggled then. And there are no easy solutions. And we'll be here, and why would we start at 3 o'clock? Because we get to stay here till it's done, and some of you can go home for dinner. We're here, if it doesn't get it done till sunrise, it's going to take till sunrise. That's what it's going to take. There is no wiggle room in the legal mandated noticing and the process it takes to get this done, that the law lays down upon us, and what has to get to city council, how it gets noticed, how it gets transmitted. There are fences and time frames involved here that dictate the date we met tonight and how this goes forward. So there is no options of, let's think about it and come back tomorrow. Would the city attorney like to have add anything to that at all, or embellish that, or was I off balance a little bit?
No, Chairman, I think that is a good summary of the task that's facing the commission this evening.
We took the city property off the menu, I think, deliberately, because the judge specifically wrote very honestly in the writ of mandate of the onerous process to for excess city thing like the city yard. The city yard was discussed 2 years ago. There used to be an animal shelter on it, and we moved it off there to up where it is now because the land was so unstable that they took the shelter down. And so the feeling of this commission 2 years ago was if the land was so unstable for homeless pets, like dogs and cats, that it was not a suitable organization for homeless people. And so that's why we never proposed it then, and that's probably, and most certainly, in addition to the writ from the judge, why no city property's on the menu tonight. So we have two reasons for it. So the Emergency Shelter Coalition made the point that this city property was onerous. The judge agreed. We've now agreed and removed it. And the one specific property in question was discussed extensively 2 years ago. And that was the rationale we used then, and now we have an additional layer on it. With that, this is tough. You know, you just have to make the decision. You have to, and I've made these tough decisions in my 20 years in the Marine Corps and 325 combat missions in Vietnam. There's some days you just have a bad day at the office and you survive and you got to get on with it, and you're lucky, or God wasn't ready to take you. Nothing's perfect, and better's the enemy of good enough. So we can build the most fabulous mousetrap or Mickey Mouse watch you want to tonight. We have no time to do that. So I'm going to come out basically in support of the staff recommendation. It's tough. It's not perfect. We can't predict the future. We don't. These home and property owners and the various homeowners association have issues with the cost of cleanup, all that stuff. Those are financial issues that you should bring to the city council to have the purview in their mind and the right and the legal condensation by law that they can make those decisions. We cannot. And kind of that's my put on it. We can be here forever and make it simple and do it quickly, or we can make it as complex as anybody around here wants to make it. Once again, I'm going to start inboard, outboard, and if you have a problem, have a solution. Mr. Crandall.
Yeah, I'd like to, thank everybody for coming and giving their comments. And we are here because the state and court mandated that we comply with SB2. SB2 says we have to have a zone for a shelter that requires no discretionary approvals for the shelter to go in. We can't necessarily pick individual lots. That's not a zone. We can't spot zone lots. But I think there's one thing we got to realize: we're not building a shelter. We're not selecting a precise location. We are strictly complying with SB2 as best we can and in a timely fashion. I heard some comments about limiting the bed count and whatnot, which are certainly things that can be discussed. I don't know if we have time here, but that could be done at the presentation to City Council, should they choose to change the bed limits of any of the shelters. As far as other sites, I mean, this is the best we've been able to find. And the one thing that was lacking in everybody's discussion tonight and in all the letters we got was they had no alternative that would meet SB2. We've looked, staff's looked. I can't find one, but we are limited in this presentation to 70 beds. Once the city meets that, any site that another shelter wants to go into then would have to comply with all requirements and discretionary approvals. So a shelter could come in and negotiate with the city on a city piece of property. If they could come to a conclusion and it ends up 70 beds, that means there would be no 70-bed project in any of the SB2 overlay sites without discretionary approval. And so this may not be the end of this, but this satisfies SB2. It's not going to make everybody happy, but we haven't found a better alternative. So I would support it for those reasons, but say it's a good fight. If you can find locations that are better, certainly present that to Planning Commission staff and City Council. They can be considered, but until a better one comes along, I need to approve this because I'm confident it'll meet SB2 and solve those issues. And I'm glad everyone showed up, and I sympathize with the situation, but I can't find a better alternative.
Mr. Blackwell.
Yes, I mirror Commissioner Crandall's thoughts on the current proposal. However, well, let me just say that I believe our work here does address a need that our city's unsheltered has, while at the same time we're attempting to meet our obligation to adhere to the provisions of and the requirements of SB2. According to staff's report, these two overlay zones, unlike other zones, meet the intent of the Senate bill by being somewhat free from environmental constraints, as well as providing reasonable access to transit, public transit, job centers, and community and/or social services. And these are things that are outlined in the criteria that we have to meet. So other locations that have been discussed don't necessarily meet that criteria to the extent that these two overlay zones do. However, I see a potential for over-concentration based on the current overlay design, especially in the Calle de las Industrias area. It's a small area. 50 beds would meet a need, and we may be limited to just one facility with 50 beds, but perhaps we revisit that. Staff has explained that our current need is calculated to be 70 beds. However, our actual number of unsheltered persons is closer to 46 individuals. So that tells me that our current need today is not quite 70. 70 is a number that we came up with as our need that would address potential growth in that need area. And I'm happy with that. I think it's a good idea to be prepared for that. In the event that things change in 2 years, we could always revisit it. But it might be a good idea that we take another look at the proportion to scale and ask staff to prepare an alternative for City Council to consider that would include fewer beds. Perhaps we explore maybe 25 beds in each zone for now, and that would address the current need for our unsheltered individuals today, and then some. Plus the churches, that was also written into the proposal that churches be included in this group of potential areas for homeless shelters or homeless accommodation to be made. That number wasn't really explored today, but I'm sure that number is more than 10 beds. I'm sure we have more than one church that could meet that 10-bed requirement, or maybe 2 or 3 or 4. Another thing I'd like to see is as part of that alternative is a separation between the licensed facilities and the more sensitive uses that may be within these zones, such as a school. There may be just one school, maybe two licensed schools. But I think for the same reasons why we discussed and considered a separation from other sensitive uses, residential specifically, we should consider the same rules here. But with all those things said, and those suggestions for an alternative to accompany the recommendation, staff's current proposal, I think, hits the intent that we have to meet the requirements of SB2 and to address the needs of our unsheltered individuals within the city. Thank you.
No, that's your phone. I'm not.
I'm not going to answer it.
Okay, and Commissioner Wu has.
I actually put it on vibrate before I got to.
Commissioner Wu, you're up to bat.
No, I'm up.
No, you're going to sit on your hands. I've said I'm going inboard, outboard.
Oh.
You're next after Commissioner Wu.
All right. You didn't say that. He said, all right.
We're underneath the ultimatum from the court. So, given that time strain, I will support this proposed resolution tonight. But I do think like to have an open discussion about many other things in this proposal, in the resolution, because there are a few items I'd like to perhaps the Planning Commission or City Council can continue to work on after we meet this deadline.
Can't hear. Could you speak louder, please?
After we meet this deadline to satisfy the court, I'd like the Planning Commission and the City Council to continue to work on this thing, because I believe there are a few things that we can improve or possibly revise. So I'm throwing some suggestions here. First, I'd like to revisit the triangle site. I understand that the main reason we exclude the triangle site, there are some environmental constraints about fire hazard and the geological instability there. Another reason is we feel that it's not because we need to put it on ballot, and we don't believe that it's going to pass it. I wonder if we have any poll to see what's the San Clemente people's opinion on that. If we can get majority of people's support, that may become a viable solution. Instead of zoning the whole Rancho San Clemente Business Park. Another site adjacent to that, I'm not sure, it's at Pico and Veracruz. Because a constraint to the triangle site is also because of the cost to engineer it and grading all this cost and add a traffic light and intersection. That corner, there's a little building there. I believe it's a utility building, is it? It's about a 1 acre big. And is it also open space?
Pico and Veracruz?
Yes, and it's also a major drainage channel
through
there. So I believe there's a pump station that's located in there.
Okay. So that site, if we were to go to a ballot to have people to decide it, that could be a potential because it's more convenient than the triangle site. And the acreages seem to be big enough, at about 1 acre. And also, another item I'd like us to continue to talk about is to improve the inventory of our primary location at Pico and Calle industrial area possibly to include Las Molinas industrial area. Our general plan says industrial zones can accommodate those compatible uses, such as a number of items, including emergency shelter. I understand that we use the 500 feet as an analytical tool to evaluate the impact to the zone, but the 500 is not it's not in our resolution, and we just use it to analyze it. I think it's possible to expand that zone to include some of the Las Molinas into the emergency overlay. And there will be some environmental constraints because some of the site will have some hazardous materials. I wonder, maybe city attorney can tell me, if we go through a checklist and decided that, we go through a checklist on particular site, and we decide there's no environmental hazard there, or we can produce a negative declaration or even a mitigated declaration, does that amount to a discretionary review?
Mm-hmm.
Well, for purposes of determining what properties go into the overlay zone, staff could do some sort of an analysis, which is what they kind of did, looking at environmental constraints to come up with the properties that they did now. But if you're talking about a review at the time that the shelter wants to be established, the problem is that once you create the overlay zone, you are saying that they get to go in as a matter of right. You can't later tell a shelter, we've looked at this particular site and you can't go in.
Okay, so
Okay,
that's
so
what
the purpose of the overlay zone is to say, in all of the areas that you zone, you get to go in as a matter of right, under the same development standards as anybody else in that area.
Okay, so unless the city does a site-by-site analysis and decide those sites are feasible without environmental constraints, then we cannot put them in the emergency overlay zone.
Well, that's not to say that every single property, every single site might be appropriate. What they're looking at is zones, and they're trying to determine from a zoning standpoint the best location for emergency shelters.
Okay. Well, the other parcel, other zones that we propose to be included in emergency zones, such as Kaya Industrials, as well as Rancho San Clemente Business Park. Staff analysis says there are some environmental constraints, such as a fire hazard or landslide, but we decided they can be mitigated, and therefore they are included. I think perhaps a similar thing can be done to.
Is that, I'm sorry, I just want to clarify, is that a question, or when we looked at this? So in looking at Calle de Industrias area, we did not see that there was a environmental constraint that would prohibit a shelter going in that would make it infeasible to establish. And the same with the Rancho San Clemente specific plan as well. Although, yes, there is fire hazards around that area. As we heard earlier, there's none that were directly adjacent to the areas that hadn't had separation mitigation put in by fire, OCFA fire, with the development of the overall areas themselves. As far as landslides went, Rancho San Clemente was identified as landslides areas, but when it was actually developed, all of that was mitigated with mass grading. And so that's why a lot of the Rancho San Clemente Business Park was mass graded, and why you have those path areas out there the way they exist today, as well as the steep landscaped slopes for fire mitigation.
So today is free of environmental constraints.
Exactly. We do not see environmental constraints for this area at this time.
Okay. Okay. And yeah, that's about it. So to summarize, I would support this proposal tonight.
Okay. You triggered some memories here, because the reason we shied away from Los Molinos across the way as we got into that area is you have the Boys and Girls Club over there with about 1,800 kids in the program, and an average daily attendance around 250 during the school year, and about the same during the summer for the summer programs, ages 6 through 10, 11, 12, 13. So we really wanted to stay away from that area and that park area over there. So that was dusted off some cobwebs of why we kind of steer. I think staff and the commission 2 years ago steered away from that, just for conversation here. Okay, at long last, and almost, Mr. Smith is actually waiting, but not to be denied, Mr. Eggleston, if he's got his phone under control, you have the mic.
Thank you. As opposed to some on the dais here, I'm not ready to support the staff's recommendation at this point. I thought we might be in preliminary discussion instead of final consideration. First of all, I wanted to talk about the transit. I remember it back in 2014 that Ed O'Connor, who's not here, I guess, this evening, said that he would support for him to support a shuttle service from his coalition. And does anyone else here that was there remember that? Do you, Bart?
A foggy vision of it, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Out of the 150 pages I reread, I guess I didn't, I'll have to dust my cobwebs off.
Yeah.
It might have been discussed in testimony, but I don't
Yeah.
remember seeing it again on the briefing here.
Jim, do you remember that at all?
I think I have this kind of the same foggy memory that Bart has. I remember that topic coming up. I don't remember who specifically brought it up.
You know, we do have a tape from 2014 that we could check for that, because this seems to be an issue that is going to come up over and over again with regard to the Rancho San Clemente business site. So I think it's important and I would encourage staff to try to find that tape, because that was something that the coalition said that they would support. So also, I wanted to talk about the area behind Denny's. And if you could pull up on the Google map here, the Mr. Vasquez properties, I would appreciate it. Because I was out there yesterday, and there are 2 single-family homes in the very middle of this area that is being considered for zoning.
This is it right here.
Yeah.
And this is it right here.
Yeah, that's the side of it right there. But if you go down to where you put the little man in front of the house, there, okay, right, and then you can keep going. Yeah, that's his residence right there. And I understand he's done a lot of work at that particular house. It's a very nice house. It's right in the middle of what is considered to be an industrial area. And just to the left of that is another single-family house. If you could shoot that in, I would appreciate that. And if you give me that piece of paper there, Mr. Vasquez's house is around 2,300 square feet. It was built in 1948. The one to the left is around 1,800 square feet and was built in 1961. And so these are 2 single-family homes. And I thought we were going to be providing a buffer around any homeless shelter area. And so that's an issue for me for that particular area. And then I have thank you, Jim. And then I have a question for Amber. Amber, I had asked before, and hopefully you have it, with regard to a buffer around the schools that are located in the Rancho San Clemente Business Park. Do you have that? Can you pull that up?
Yes, we do have maps for that.
Because I think it's important that there's a buffer around schools. I don't know what the buffer would be, but I think it's an incompatible land use to have a homeless shelter right nearby a homeless shelter. So I think that if we can pull that up, and if you had the buffers areas that I had requested, that would be great.
So what you're seeing on the slide before you right now, and I just want to make sure I'm getting this correct, you're talking about preschools. You were looking for buffers from preschools, correct, Mr. Eggleston? And so in this area, the dark red line, you will see the proposed overlay as well as identified registered preschools. Here's the Talega Life School here with this one, I believe, has a 200-foot buffer around the preschool to give you an idea of what that would be.
Could you enlarge that?
Yes, I can. So this gives you an idea of what that spatial area would be in the context of the Rancho San Clemente Business Park, with a buffer around those.
Okay, so the one that's in the middle there, what preschool is that?
This is the Toledo Life Church to TLC preschool here?
And so the circle around that is 200 feet, is that?
That's correct.
That's correct? Okay, and then above that, there's a buffer around another one. What school is that?
This one is the, what street are we, Lapata? This is Gratitude Garden, located right here. And then the one to the far right is Kindercare.
And where's the Heritage Church?
Heritage Church is
school?
located right here.
I'm sorry, where?
Right here where you see my little star guy. Here he is here.
They don't have a preschool.
Not, well, it's a homeschool, but they go to that facility 2 times a week. I called and I asked them. I'm sorry, could you, where is that again? It's hard for me to see.
So here's, this is just, so you can see where my cursor is. And it's this corner area right here, that's the Heritage Church.
Where the,
So
where the purple is right there?
See the little, see the
Oh,
crosshairs?
oh, that, okay. All right. So you didn't put a buffer around that, did you?
No, we did not be.
They're not a registered preschool with the state of California.
It's still a school. Those children go there twice a week. Plus, they go there additionally for other types of activities, for church activities and so forth. But they do go there in classrooms twice a week.
I know, but we were asked to map preschools, and it's not a preschool.
Okay, I did ask.
definition of the
I
state
did ask
code.
for the Heritage
They
Church
do
to
have,
be.
I did see on the website that they do have a homeschool.
Yeah, but they go there twice a week. Okay, so those are of concerns to me, because I think that the schools in those areas, the 3 that I see right there, should have a buffer around them. I don't think that there should be a homeless shelter adjacent to them in any way, shape, or form. I think that's an incompatible land use for that area. And by the way, the triangle site is open space. Open space is really taken off the table. If that ever went to the vote of the people here in San Clemente, maybe you weren't here at the time when we had that particular initiative on the ballot, but I must tell you, people are very much in favor of open space, and they're not going to put any building on that, whether it's a homeless shelter or a shopping center or anything. They're not going to do that. So,
I understand that.
Yeah, okay. So my position at this point is to support staff's recommendation, except for the Kaya Industrious site, and to put the homeless shelter area in the Rancho San Clemente Business Park area with buffers around the schools. And that's the only thing that I will support at this point.
Now, for information, 2 of these schools on the site are not even in the zone. So,
Well, I'm concerned about the one that's in the middle and the Heritage Church.
I've got one question, if I can
Sure.
just jump in. How do we justify then in even discussing churches as a potential provider of homeless shelters, 10 beds or whatever, because most all churches provide services for kids?
Well, this is a school. The Heritage Church has a school. It's a home school type situation, but the children go to that facility twice a week. So that to me would be important, for it to have a buffer around these 2 facilities then.
and your proposed buffer is 200 feet?
Yes,
That's your proposed solution?
yes. And I will not be supporting the Kaya Industrial site at all because of the 2 residences that are located right in the middle of it. I do have a question here, Amber, someone asked about the type of facilities in Rancho San Clemente business properties. We do have facilities there that would help the homeless, is that correct?
That's correct.
Could you list those type of facilities?
FAM is located there. We do have several churches located in the business park, as well as several public institutional buildings located in the business park.
There's a dental, medical.
Right on the corner
extension.
of Pico and La Plata, there is the Camino Health Center that provides low and no-cost health and dental services as well.
And we also have Sovereign that provides health services.
That's correct.
Mental health services.
That's
there.
correct.
So we do have facilities in the San Clemente business, in the Rancho San Clemente Business Park that would assist the homeless.
Most definitely.
Okay. The only thing that I'm concerned about, obviously, was the transit thing, and I think it's important that we get our handle around that. Because they do need transportation up there. But as I did mention before, Ed O'Connor did mention that they were supportive of their own shuttle service. So,
Thank you, Commissioner Eggleston. Let's see, Mr. Smith has been waiting over there, and he needs to get his first bite at the
I was
apple.
kind of hoping you'd never get to me.
You can run, but you can't hide, Commissioner Smith. It's part of the job.
First off, I want to thank everybody for coming and expressing your view on this. It's really tough. Several of these commissioners have been through this before, but I haven't. This is the first time, and it certainly isn't easy, and it certainly isn't easy on your side of the table either. But I think we got to kind of play by the rules, and we have to make a recommendation tonight, and we have to move this along. And I've been waiting for a magic bullet to appear, and I haven't seen one, haven't heard about one. All I've been able to discover on this process is what the city has done in their best effort to try to come up with areas that made sense for this program. And I think at the end of the day, they did a good job. I think there could be areas that could even be worse on people, but I think these probably have the least impact. And I think you need to understand that that's what we're trying to do here, is to find the least impact. If there were other places that were just wonderful and didn't bother anybody and were just great with bus services and everything else, we would pick those sites. But we don't have them. This is a city that's fairly spread out with its residential, and the city has done their very best to come up with parameters that make sense to me about how you go about trying to locate this, and the deal is that we have to do it. We can't just walk away and say San Clemente just doesn't work for this. I mean, it'd be kind of nice maybe if we could do that, but we can't. So we got to play by the rules, and I'm going to support the recommendation of these two sites with the proviso that a buffer is put around the school sites on that particular site there, and on the other site, if we could go to the other site.
Mm-hmm. I do have.
I'm going to recommend that site can only support SB2 without any adjacency to the two residentials. And that's my recommendation.
So you're proposing some form of a buffer around those two houses,
Yeah,
like
buffer,
100 feet or
but
some?
No direct, actually not so much a buffer, but no direct connection of property.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Smith, very succinct. Let's see, we have two additional lights on now. Mr. Blackwell, you're next, and then we'll go back to Commissioner Wu here.
Thank you. So, Amber, question for you regarding the Caideas Industrious residential properties. These are legal non-conforming uses, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And have you looked at the any sort of buffering, be it 200, 500, any sort of buffering at all, and what that would look like as it relates to our current overlay?
No, we have not.
Okay. And just guessing, this is an educated guess, of course, from you, very educated guess, how much of that area would be compromised with a 200-foot buffer around the residential zones?
A significant amount would be compromised because the residence is in the center.
Understood. But would it completely prohibit an operator from finding a site in there that could work.
So if we were to look at the purple line around the school above it, to kind of give us some scale as this, that's a 200-foot buffer around there. And if we were to move that to the center, that would give you, an idea of how much that covers, which is a significant area, if not the entire thing.
We have a couple signal lights in the corner by the phone company's building there.
Okay, so 500-foot buffer would be significantly larger than that and completely change the
You're seeing a
character.
200-foot buffer across the way over there.
Yeah. Okay. Well, again, I'm in support of this proposal with, I would like to see an alternative move forward to council with a buffer with the schools. I think that would be a wise maneuver. I think that we have a certain minimum requirement to meet, and we've established a need. I don't think that 70 is the number. I'm not feeling comfortable with that number. I think it's a large number, and I think we'll grow into that. And I think we could accommodate the actual need right now with one overlay zone. But I think at the same time we have options here. So kind of on the fence with eliminating this zone. So I don't know that I could stand behind that at this point.
Yeah, it's kind of a tough call. The first couple of meetings we had on this, the 5 or 7 meetings 2 years ago, sometimes I think one night we had over 300 people in here. And Mayor Dana Point's standing on the wall right behind you, now our Orange County Supervisor. And we worked that number pretty hard with Officer Bull, who's been a designated homeless point of contact in town. That's one of his jobs. In addition to the point of contact people and FAM, and we had a very lengthy discussion on arriving at that number, the 65, 70 where we're at now. So I think I'm fairly comfortable with the number. And the other thing is the law requires you every 2 years to refocus on that and look at it. And so I guess I'd like to say that there was a lot of discussion on it 2 years ago that got us to that number, is all I'm trying to point out.
May I ask you a question, Chairman Brown? That 2 years now, we're going to revisit this in 2 years, ongoing, every 2 years. Wouldn't it be possible to revisit our zones as well and the needs?
Well, that almost gets, I think, ask the city attorney to weigh in on this, but I think the whole process kind of drives that way. I'm not sure. But as you look at the point in time over time, and that number grows or shrinks, whatever it causes you to some sort of rehab, because HCD is going to reevaluate your housing element every 8 years. In fact, we're on a double pump right now, and I won't even get the audience involved in that. For housing elements, that's another experience in itself. So, so this is the one element in our general plan that we don't control over. We don't have a final approval of it. That's the one element of our 12 elements in our general plan that's state approved, and it's on an 8-year cycle. Yeah. And in our case right now, it's on a 4-year cycle, I think it is. And so there's a lot of mechanisms in there that come back to play that a future commission and council will be revisiting this along with staff, I feel. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I just want to note that we will be updating it every 2 years as the way that our laws are written or proposed after the point in time count. And what our ordinance states is that after every point in time count is published, we will converse with our local law officials and social service providers to come up with a amount that will be adopted by the city council. Okay. It's every 2 years.
Mr. Wu, you've been waiting patiently, and then we'll come back to Commissioner Crandall.
Thank you. Just regarding this Kaya industrial area, I support to include it. Not only that, I like to reiterate that I would like to see the city to continue to study Los Molinos as well as the Kaya Lago, because I personally don't feel very confident that this will muster through the court's scrutiny. Los Molinos is a major job center. It provides a lot of low skill level job that perfectly match those people if we were to help them to get some training and a job and back to a normal life. Secondly, is response to regarding the open space. I still feel that open space is possible. Of course, I acknowledge that Commissioner Eggleston knows much better about the city and the political climate here. But imagine we need a ballot to approve an open space for a new hospital. I believe the people of San Clemente would support that. Emergency shelter is a little different, but it's mandated by the court for the city to provide. We can perceive that it will have quite a lot negative impact to Rancho San Clemente Business Park if we can rezone that pump station site or part of that triangle site. That provides an opportunity that we can take Rancho San Clemente Business Park off the zone after that. And it's also easier to provide transportation if we just rezone that little parcel and say this is emergency shelter only zone. Suddenly that zone itself will meet all the requirements the city is asked to provide. Then provided transportation becomes much easier because it's just one site.
I'll weigh in on with Commissioner Eggleston on this. When we discussed this 2 years ago, and the business park was in strength with this, recommending this site, but because of Measure V, which drove the land use thing, which was a big land use vote of the people in this city, which involved Bella Colina golf issues back then, and the law was very strict. There are some small little wiggle rooms, but on advice of legal counsel then, which was another law firm at the time, that now that BBK is here, they said it was highly inadvisable to try to do that without, going to a vote of the people. And I think the commission at that time fairly well agreed. I think the experience of the commissioners on the commission at that time, and like Commissioner Eggleston with Measure V and the motions it brought, was probably a bridge too far. That's you could not meet the court mandate with that. You want to look at that in the future. That would take several years to work your way through a ballot measure approved by the people to satisfy the use of that land. I mean, lots of other things work there other than Measure V has a very high chinning bar. And so I think we all felt the same way you did 2 years ago, but it was just, it's just a bridge too far, and it's just a tough way to go, and I think I agree with Commissioner Eggleston on his position on it. Long waiting enough, Commissioner Crandall?
Oh, no problem. When is our next census of the, it seems like 2 years ago was the last census, so we're due pretty soon.
So we had our point in time count in 2015. It was done January 2015. It was published approximately 4 years after, or 4 years, I'm sorry, approximately 6 months after that. So it'll be in 2017, January 2017 is when it'll come again.
Okay, very good. And I liked a couple of things that Commissioner Smith said, and I'm wondering why we chose, I think I know why we chose 50 for the one site. But if it's going to take 2 sites to satisfy our minimum 70 bed count, if we went 35 there to relieve some of the impact on it and have them not adjacent, and then did the buffers around the school sites as was discussed, would we get a head nod on that, that seems pretty reasonable?
You're thinking of 35 at Cali Industrious?
Maybe drop it down to 35, because then it still takes 2
well,
sites.
You would need another site or 2 in the business park.
Excuse me?
Not necessarily.
Well, I mean, we're shooting for 70, and then it would go to discretionary approvals after that point. So if we got a center in both sites, I'm sure they're going to build to the maximum that they can, which would be 35. That would satisfy, because it's going to take 2 either way. even if they build 50 in that site, it's going to take another site in the park.
But we're not even counting
Mathematics
churches.
says it takes 2.
Well, you can't count churches.
You cannot count the churches.
No.
They opt out, they're off the table. There's that purely emergency, they're volunteer. And we had a letter of correspondence come in 2 years ago where the churches said we're willing to fundraise for it, we're willing to support it, but we're not going to be willing to set up a permanent on-basing shelter. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong with you or Ms. Tam, that HEZ says, once they say they're out, they're out. I mean, we list them for emergency purposes, which is what they're in. Is that correct?
Just wanted to provide the commission with a little history of why we went to 50. It was partially because of the limitation in terms of there's 16 parcels on that particular site, so the likelihood, and not a lot of vacancies, so the likelihood of it occurring there isn't as high. We were just trying to meet our number, and so part of this equation is what's the likelihood of getting to 70 beds? So we upped that number in that district to increase the likelihood that something's going to happen. So it was part of that kind of that balance we were trying to achieve. Just to give you some history of why the number 50
And the likely
came out
statement is what the state law
instead of
requires.
another 35 back.
Yeah,
when we
I was just
originally
looking at the site, it's going to take 2 to 3 sites to get 50 beds in there. I mean, it'd take, what are we looking at, 20,000, 2,000?
Keep it simple.
At 200 square foot per bed. Yeah. And I was just saying that it would also provide less impact on the existing residents in there also, even though we're looking at the zone, not the uses within that zone.
100 square feet or 10 by 10, as I recall, was when some of us went to, we visited the Laguna Beach shelter 2 years ago. That was notice and status. And so we went up there, and I think that's the factor they used when we went through the facility. It was everybody gets the roller mat out on a 10 by 10 foot square. That gives them a place to sleep, and then they can arrange their belongings alongside their little square on the floor. So 100 square feet is kind of that's what they use in Laguna Beach, and that's probably where the mindset we came from, just from through all of us that toured it back then. Okay, we can, let's get closure here. I think we have support for what's the staff's recommended. I think we have an additional a feeling of some 200-foot circle around some of the schools in the business park. Is that a consensus? We want to have a consensus there. And is it be the best way from staff to recommend going forward the staff report? But if you want to relook at the numbers and the 2 locations, the 2 zones that we're recommending,
We can provide that in the council's
to the council
report.
How's that?
Could it be presented as an option?
Yes.
Option 1 would be the current proposal.
What we'll do is we'll summarize what your recommendations are in there for them, along with the proposed ordinance.
Okay. So that they have some flexibility as we get more light on the
Correct.
subject going forward to try to meet the time frame here. Is that amenable to everybody?
So we're talking about reduced bed counts in both zones, or in the smaller zone, and a buffer around the
Correct.
Around the church.
Or various, yeah. And they can provide that as an option, like marijuana, option 1, option 2, option 3, whatever.
Including the adjacency issue and
No abutting?
What we'll do is we'll just note what each planning commissioner's concern was, if there was a recommendation,
Okay. I
and
think
what the
no
consensus
abutting-
was.
Looking at Industrious down there, the no abutting to those 2 properties is appropriate to comment. I think Commissioner Eggleston did some pretty good research on that, and that's appropriate. And same with your comment also, Commissioner Smith.
Well, one issue with having that separation is a farm is already next to a church. So, and the farm provide a lot of service to these people. And you cannot physically separate farm and the church nearby.
But they're not a homeless shelter.
They're not a homeless shelter. We don't. Okay. Let's entertain a motion. I think we have consensus, and we'll work on the wording.
We're looking at the resolution, not the ordinance. The resolution.
That's correct, the resolution.
Right. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'm going to move that we approve resolution number PC 16025, a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of San Clemente, California, recommending...
026.
026, thank you. Recommending the City Council approve a negative declaration of environmental impact and amend the general plan, Rancho San Clemente West Pico Corridor Specific Plan, and the zoning ordinance and precise zoning plan to implement California Government Code Section 65583 regarding Senate Bill 2 SB 2, the Emergency Shelter Act, City File Number GPA 16319, ZA 16320, and SPA 16321, with the understanding that staff will provide options, that staff, one, will provide buffers around the two schools sites in the Rancho San Clemente Business Park, and that there be a buffer around the single-family residence within the industrial area, or Calle Industrias, and that they provide an option of possibly reducing the bed count in Calle Industrias from 50 to 35.
And I just want to clarify, it's not a buffer, it's just not adjacent.
Correct.
Not adjacent.
It's not a buffer, it's just not adjacent.
I have a motion. Is everybody clear on that? Do I have a second?
A second.
Mr. Smith seconds. All in,
Can I
Pardon?
interrupt for a second?
Yeah.
Chairman, I just want to make sure that I understand the motion.
Okay.
The motion is to, in essence, approve staff's recommendation.
Correct.
But to take forward to the city council the options that you identified. Is that
Correct.
correct?
That's correct.
Commissioner?
So
Okay,
things move along quickly.
okay, thank
that's
you.
the option. All right. Hopefully that will satisfy the writ of mandate, Christina.
The writ of mandate requires that the council take an action on the 18th.
Okay.
So what's important is that something move forward
Yep.
tonight to the council.
Okay, I think we're doing that. and we're
Right.
Giving them some options. Okay, I have a
Yes.
motion and a second by Commissioner Crandall and Commissioner Smith. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I will not be able to support it because of Calle Industrias.
Okay, so it's passes 5-1 with one abstention, right, or one absence? 5-4, one against, and one recused, right? Commissioner Talley had to recuse. Okay, moving forward here, we have more on our agenda to go through, I think. If I can find it. We have no new business, no old business, or any reports from commissioners and staff. Tentative future future agenda, et cetera. I would note that I think on the 27th and the 29th of this month, there's a notice here by city staff that meeting in the community center for community outreach for the Pier Bowl plan, specific plan and whatever. Mr. Commissioner? Yeah, would you please?
Yeah, on the 27th, next week, is that Tuesday? I'm not sure.
Tuesday and Thursday.
Tuesday and Thursday. So Tuesday is a workshop with the Los Molinos District, just to explain the update to the specific plan. It's the West Pico Corridor specific plan, making it consistent with the already adopted general plan land uses. And then in the Pier Bowl, that would be on Thursday. There's a little bit more to discuss on that particular area because there's a council directive to expand some of the overlay adjacent to the Pier Bowl to basically connect it to the downtown section of the overlay.
Discussed
So
by
there's that aspect to it.
Councilman
And then-
Ham last night.
And then also, there's more land use changes that were done in the general plan in the parable. So there'll be a little bit more meaty discussion, I think, in the second workshop on Thursday. And both of those are occurring at the Ole Hansen Beach Club.
Beach Club?
I'm sorry. No, wait, I'm sorry, yeah.
Boy,
Yeah.
special opening, I'm going to be there.
The Ole Hansen, what is it, the Fireside Room?
The Fireside Room.
Yeah, sorry.
The only Hanson.
Okay, yeah. Commissioner Blackwell, I'm sure has something to share with us on the Coastal Advisory Committee.
Yes, I do, Chair Brown. The Coastal Advisory Committee met
Quiet,
on
please.
September 8th. On our agenda, first item was to nominate and elect a chair and vice chair. We had low attendance, low committee attendance, so we did not vote. So that item has been moved to our October 13th meeting. We also welcomed our new environmental program supervisor, Cynthia Mallett. So Cynthia comes to us from the city of Oceanside with many years of relevant experience.
Okay, taking Mary Von Vrick's place.
That's right, yep. Yep, we're optimistic. So the city went on to, the CAC approved 2 proposals for grants, and we actually recommended approval by the city manager for 2 $2,000 grants that would be granted to the SC Water Task Force, as well as the Ecology Center out in San Juan Capistrano. Now, that's an outside entity, outside of our city, but they're doing great things for our city, and it's something that everybody should visit. But the committee expressed a concern over the weakness in outreach, and we're hoping for more or strengthen outreach so we can get more applicants within our city to apply. The bacteriological report came in, usual suspects there. Potential future agendas. We're going to be looking in September. Yes, the Trafalgar report will be presented to us, and I felt a little more confident this time.
When?
In September at a meeting.
September or October?
No, our September meeting. That will be presented.
A year and a half and then waiting, okay.
Yeah. And we're also going to look at potential Poche land outfall diversion. And that is, we have high bacteriological counts at the Poche Beach outlet there. And staff is looking at a plan, actually the county is looking at staff's plan to divert the water to the treatment plant instead of allowing it to go out into the ocean there. So that's pending county review right now, so there could be some movement there.
Diversion, very good.
Mm-hmm. And we're also going to look at the long and short-term beach erosion and structural protection of beach facilities. This would include a possible update to the city policy of 2001. And that sums it up. And our next meeting will occur on October 13th at 7 p.m. at the Ole Hansen Fireside Room located in San Clemente Community Center.
Okay. Yeah. And they approved the sand stuff for North Beach last night.
Yes, that was approved last night, yeah.
Okay, with that, if there's nothing else, please do.
It's not sunrise yet. You said we were going to be for sunrise.
You get to stay till sunrise, and you get to guard council chambers till sunrise. Bring your sleeping bag.
I move that we adjourn to the regular planning commission meeting to be held at 6 p.m. on October the 5th, 2016, in the council chambers in the city hall located at 100 Avenida Presidio, San Clemente, California.
I have a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second by Commissioner Black. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passes 6-0. Meeting adjourned.